We're live.
Do I need to flip this switch here?
Yeah, it needs to be on.
Are we live?
Yes, so when you've got it turned down so the rest of the building can't hear. Okay. Well, thank you. This is our first meeting of our newly formed Transportation Committee. And we've asked Randy Gates, who is the administrator of the Gaston, Cleveland, Lincoln MPO, to come and give us an update on the big DOT projects affecting Belmont and Gaston County, and then talk about sort of what's already in the pipeline and funded, what's in Belmont but not on the 85-74 corridor that we spent a lot of time talking about, and then also looking forward into Spot 6.0 that Richard will be working with the MPO board on our priorities. And so we've had some meetings as staff with Randy, and we brought in Councilman Turner to a meeting in December to talk about sort of our priorities, but want to get the committee's take on priorities for that. And just sort of as an organizational piece before we turn it over to Ms. Gates, the city of Gastonia has had a transportation committee of council for a while now. I don't know how long, but I guess they use that to talk about, the state-funded projects, but also I would assume local, citywide transportation projects, and that's sort of what I was envisioning with this committee. A lot of what we do is on state roads, and so we need to work with the MPO and with DOT, but with our TIA ordinance, there's a lot of other just sort of small pieces to transportation that maybe fall through the cracks or wouldn't rise to the level of needing to be funded through the STIP or through the SPOT program. So we just want to get some feedback from a committee of council to give us direction, and Shelley in particular as our planning director, as transportation has come, it's entwined in everything that we do now. So normally the council committees just meet as needed, but I'd like for this committee to meet pretty regularly, maybe not monthly, but maybe every other month. Probably we'll figure out the schedule with the MPO board so that we could either have this committee meeting before that or after that, so you could either report on what the MPO board was doing, Richard, and bring it to this committee, or maybe meet before the MPO board meeting so that you can get feedback from the committee and take it to the board and just apprise us of then things that would come from the committee and the MPO board that we need to update the full council on. But we can work on all of that later. But that's sort of what I'm thinking, to really utilize your time. And I'm glad that you all are members of this committee, because Councilman Turner is obviously our MPO board representative, and Martha is our alternate, and Ron is our previous board member. So you've worked with all of them, so we've got experience on this committee with how the MPO and DOT works. So, and I'm sure it hasn't changed a whole lot since Ron was on the MPO board. We've just, I guess, each iteration of the SPOT process changes a little bit, but it's still basically going through the ranking process. So if that sounds okay, and we can figure out dates and times. If 4 o'clock works, that's great for staff, if possible, and we'd always send an invitation to Randy to join us, but we can work out all of that. But if there are no other questions, I'd turn it over to Randy to just give us an update.
All right. I'm going to hand this out. We can just kind of take one and pass it if you don't mind.
Thank you.
So this newsletter was developed by NCDOT. If you want to keep those, if you want extra, we've got plenty at the office. But we had asked NCDOT to help us develop something that could really highlight and educate our citizens in Gaston County about all the projects that are funded along the I-85 and US 2974 Wilkinson Boulevard corridor, because there's a lot. We've been really fortunate to get quite a few projects funded, but at the same time, when those projects are under construction, it's going to be a little crazy for travelers within our county, whether it's residents or if it's just people kind of traveling through in their daily commute to and from work. So we worked with our division office, and they worked with central office with their communications department to put this together. This is going to be a document that's going to need to be updated quite frequently. We'll kind of go down the list of some of these, and I'm going to note that some dates are already shifting with the draft STIP that came out. That was released, I believe, week before last is when that was released. And so some of these dates are shifting. They're not going to update this newsletter until it's adopted by the Board of Transportation in July. But I did want to bring some of those schedule changes to your attention. So, and the bulk of the projects that are funded in Belmont are either along 85 or the Wilkinson Boulevard corridor. So I-5000 is a project in Gastonia. That's the I-85 321 interchange improvement project. Not in Belmont, but certainly will have an effect on commuters from Belmont. That project is underway, and they're looking to be complete with that project by November of this year, 2019. The C5600K, that is a CMAQ congestion mitigation air quality project that is funded. We just actually got out of a meeting for that particular project. An incident ICM integrated corridor management project. So essentially what DOT is trying to do is during construction of I-85, that widening project, or just in general, if there are any incidents along 85, they want to be able to alert the motorist and let them know when they need to get off of I-85 onto US 74 and then potentially back onto 85. Or if you're traveling down 74 and you're trying to figure out the quickest way to get to Mecklenburg County for work, potentially, and there's an incident in the morning, there's going to be signage along 74 that's going to tell you which way is most appropriate to get on I-85. So maybe it's to go up Main Street, or maybe there might be a marker along 74 that tells you to go straight to 85 until you're on Park Street. So it's really going to help direct the commuters on which way is best to get around an incident, or again, if it's under construction. So that project is underway, looking at being implemented starting this spring. U6038, integrated corridor signal system. Responsive signal system is what they're calling it, as opposed to what was submitted for funding, which was an adaptive signal system. Still looking at sometime this year to implement that. That's coordinating all the signals along 74 and also some signals along Park Street and signals at on Main. So I guess the one at the Abbey and all of those would be integrated into this system. Purpose is trying to just flush traffic down 74. And right now, those signals don't really talk to each other. And they don't talk to the signals that are in Gastonia or Cramerton. So we're just really trying to get all of those signals coordinated.
And if I can interrupt you.
Yep.
So one of the things that we'll need to be thinking about is who's going to manage those signals. So currently DOT manages them because they're DOT signals. But the city of Gastonia has an agreement with DOT where the city of Gastonia manages DOT signals within Gastonia. And so they've got a, I guess, a center where they can look at the cameras and make sort of, programmatic changes based on, or timing changes based on conditions. So it could be that we would want Gastonia to manage our signal system and have it integrated with Gastonia's signal system. Or we just allow DOT to do it. The Gastonia is having some conversations with NCDOT about its signals and about these and its capacity to take on our signal system. being reimbursed by NCDOT for that work. So as I understand, it wouldn't cost us money. The big question is interoperability with Charlotte's signal system, so that it's something, because the goal of all of this is to, particularly with the ICM, is one integrated signal system. So if there's an incident on 85, you get on 74, and it doesn't really matter which town you're in. The signals are all coordinated. So depending on how the conversations between Gastonia and NCDOT and us go this spring, we may bring this committee, an MOU to see if we want Gastonia to manage our signal system or DOT.
Very good. Next project, I-5719 and U-3608. So this is the I-85 widening project. So widening 85 to 8 lanes, 4 lanes in each direction from US 321, that's at exit 17, down to NC 273 or Park Street at exit 27. So this is the first one that you can scratch through and make a note of a schedule change. This project is being delayed. So where it says begin right-of-way acquisition in winter 2020, that's going to be 2022. And construction beginning in 2022. That's a design build. So in order to balance the budget statewide, when it comes to transportation projects, that project needed to be shifted 2 years delayed. So as I've talked to people about this project, I say that I always try to find the positives in everything. And one positive that I see with this project being delayed is, and we'll talk about a few other projects kind of down the list, but as you're probably aware, we have funding to replace the Catawba River Bridge on 74. And we have funding now to replace the South Fork River Bridge on 74 and widen the bottleneck. So before this shift in schedule, before the delay, both of those projects were going to be under construction at the same time. Can you imagine the nightmare that was going to be if 85 and 74 were under construction at the same time? So because of this delay, we feel that we will be able to complete the projects along US 74 Wilkinson Boulevard prior to I-85 going under construction. So although we all are ready to see I-85 widened, I think that the delay in the schedule is going to work out to our benefit. Again, if not, it was just going to be a logistical nightmare to try to get in and out of Gaston County and Mecklenburg County during peak hours. So I think that is actually going to be a good thing. The design work is still going to progress as it's currently ongoing. We'll just have more time to get it all completed before we start the right-of-way acquisition. Moving down U-5800, that's to improve the intersection of Wilkinson Boulevard and Main Street at NC7. I know you're all aware of that. You've recently adopted, I don't know if it was a letter or was it a resolution of support?
It was a letter of concern.
Letter of concern. I was going to say of support of doing away with the project, not of the current design that's being pushed forward. So Adrian and I were talking at our last meeting. Neither one of us has heard from NCDOT or the project consultant since that letter was received. So I don't really have an update on that. I don't know if they are working on an alternate design to bring to you to take a look at. I know that they were taking a look at the bike ped accommodations at that intersection, but other than that, I have not heard any update from that letter. So that one is still at this point tracking to begin right-of-way acquisition in the spring, with construction beginning in summer 2020. Again, that may very well change. Continuing down, you've also got a funded project at the intersection of Wilkinson Boulevard and Park Street, or 273. I have not seen any potential design options for that. I have a sneaky suspicion that we might see the same design option that you've seen for NC 7. Just to throw that out there, so, we will await. I'm not sure what consultant's working on that, if it's the same consultant that's doing the intersection with NC 7 or Maine, or if it's someone else, I don't know.
Do we have Michigan lifts in our area, other places?
We don't have any, I'm trying to think the one that they always refer to. It's not in our region,
Okay,
Concord has some.
do they? Okay.
I think that's about the closest.
okay.
Poplar Tent Road.
So, traffic engineers, and I'm not a traffic engineer, I don't pretend to be, and I'm glad I'm not a traffic engineer, but they say that they work well to move traffic, move vehicles. But if you're concerned about the pedestrians through that area, I'm not sure how that all will work. So that's what they're currently going back to the drawing board to at least show how it may potentially incorporate safe movement of pedestrians and bicyclists. So that's one thing that they're working on. But again, don't be surprised if you see the same design concept for the NC 273 intersection. And we can deal with it at that time. U 5965, that one's in Gastonia. That's at Union Road, Broad Street in Franklin. BR 0020, that is the bridge replacement project over the Catawba River on 74. So that will be to widen the bridge. Right now it's 4 lanes, so it would be widened to 6 lanes. And then with the approaches tying in to where the road is currently a 6-lane configuration. Right-of-way acquisition winter 21 with beginning construction in 22. We have been having multiple conversations with NCDOT Structures Unit and consultants along with Charlotte Area Transit System, CATS, about the future light rail extension into Gaston County. So we are constantly having meetings with them. Actually, we had one last week to discuss how that could potentially work together. Most likely it will be 2 bridges. Most likely the light rail would run alongside the north side of 74. Again, on a separate bridge crossing. But one thing that we're working on is if there's any potential to incorporate the light rail crossing into the environmental studies that are going to have to be underway for the highway bridge. So that's one thing that we're working on. Just making sure that there's nothing done with the widening of the bridge that would preclude any light rail in the future. Which that project is moving, the light rail extension project is moving full speed ahead. And if you hear, DOT now and CATS talking, it's not about if, it's when it's going to happen. And that extension is going to be adopted as part of a plan tomorrow. Well, the recommendation from staff tomorrow night to the MTC is to extend into Belmont, somewhere between exits 26 and 27 on 74. Or Main Street and Park Street. And then with a future dashed line into downtown Gastonia needing further study. But this is going to be part of their 2030 plan. So the intent would be to have that project complete, open to the riders by 2030, which in transportation planning years is not that far ahead of us. So that's really exciting, and we will continue to track that and advocate for that as much as we possibly can. Then the project below the Catawba River Bridge replacement is U6146. That's to widen Wilkinson Boulevard to 4 to 6 lanes, as well as replacing and widening the bridge over the South Fork. We're having the same discussions with those the folks. It's a different consulting firm on that one, but obviously NCDOT is participating. So the same discussions about including potential for light rail is carried over for that project as well. U 6043, that's in Gastonia, near the Franklin Square area. Next two projects are another funded project for widening of I-85, so this would be kind of the next phase. So it would go from US 321 or exit 17 back down to the South Carolina line. So if you're heading I-85 southbound. So this is another one that you can kind of scratch through and make updates on the timeline. Both of those projects now, right-of-way acquisition is being pushed to winter of 2025, and construction beginning in winter 2028. The next project down, that's a Gastonia project. So if you skip down to U 6143, that is a newly funded project, so that's down in front of the State Employees Credit Union. So looking at improving that intersection with extending the left turn lane from, I guess that would be westbound 74 onto Catawba. So extending that, and then I believe adding a right turn lane, a dedicated right turn lane from Catawba onto eastbound 74. And so that one, looking at 25 for right-of-way acquisition and 26 to begin construction. So that schedule is not changing. In addition to that one, a newly funded project that we just got in would be intersection improvement projects at NC 273 or Lower Armstrong Road and South Point Road. So we did receive funding to convert that or construct a roundabout at that location. Currently, the draft STIP shows that for right-of-way and utilities work in FY27 with construction in FY29. I will say that project will not be considered a committed project, and that one would need to be rescored in the next round of prioritization. Because we'll be locking in years 20 to 25, so anything after that will have to be rescored. I don't foresee that project not being funded again. I mean, we have had some that have had funding, and then when it's rescored, it doesn't score well enough for funding. But I think that particular intersection improvement project scores pretty well. So I think that would continue to be funded in the next round. So those are funded projects. Any questions about any of those? Adrian, do you know of anything that I may have missed? Funded?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I think, okay.
The roundabout, I know we talked about this before, but I can't remember what the outcome was. Was there any way to move that timeline forward at all? No, because 2027 is out there, and that traffic is bad now.
Yeah.
I mean, we're 8 years out from having any relief there.
So when we score projects in a round of prioritization, it is based off of the now, the traffic counts, the crash data, everything that's existing. So every year that you tack on, like the next round of prioritization is going to use new traffic counts. So if there's more counts, or if you've had additional accidents occur, then it may cause that project to score better and may cause it to be accelerated in timeline. But other than that, there's nothing that we can do. I was actually sharing with Shelley and Adrian at a meeting that Gastonia hand-delivered a $5 million check to NCDOT out of bond money to try to expedite a project that's funded in the STIP. And it was like, thanks, but the timeline didn't shift. So I don't think there's anything that you could do to expedite that project.
That's what I was gonna ask you next, if any matching would move it up.
No. I don't think so. I mean, we could see, we know that it scores well enough to get funded. Local match does sometimes it can help the score, but I don't foresee any local match really expediting that project.
Other than a roundabout, I mean, is there any interim relief?
We did talk to Division 12 staff, when we had that meeting, or it may have been even before that. We've talked to Division 12 staff about the potential, was it just adding another stop sign?
Yeah, I believe it was making it a three-way stop.
So that it would give relief and help traffic that's coming down Lower Armstrong, taking that left on the South Point Road. It would stop the traffic, especially those that are cutting through that neighborhood to try to get out in front of the traffic. It would make them stop so that you could at least take turns getting onto South Point Road. And I know, so Dean Ledbetter he is our corridor development engineer that's working with us, and that was on his list of things to talk to the division staff about, is potentially adding that stop sign there.
Randy, is there any way that we can push to move up the U6143 that's at East Catawba and Wilkinson when the timing is the same time as the bridge replacement across the Catawba Bridge? They had showed the area, the project area actually extended through that intersection over by the college. And while they're looking at that, they'll have to do receiving lanes and so forth.
Yeah.
Over in that area, I don't, if there's a way to get that project coordinated so it's one and done.
Yeah, I can certainly bring that to their attention normally when they really get underway, because right now it's funded in draft form.
Okay.
So come July, when the STIP is adopted by the Board of Transportation and it becomes a fully funded project, then maybe we can get it coordinated. But I'll certainly bring that to their attention and just see if there's anything we can do at this point. I mean, because it is common that they pull projects in, one that we see I-5719 or the 85 widening's been combined with U3608. So they were two individual projects, and they still are kind of in by name, but it is one project in the merger process. So I can certainly bring that to their attention. Okay. So those are funded projects, and you're very fortunate because you do have quite a few projects. I could be making this presentation in Lincolnton and I'd have like 2 projects to report on. So we're very fortunate in Gaston that we have received a lot of funding through projects that are funded, whether it's in the existing current STIP or in the new STIP that's going to be coming out. But I do fully understand that Belmont has a lot of other priorities that you would still like to see funded in future rounds of funding. And so things that I wanted to point out. So the draft STIP has come out. That's the 2020 to 2029 10-year programmed projects for DOT. We're jumping right into the next round of prioritization, which is P6. And so we have made our rounds with Division 12 staff and MPO staff, and we've talked to all of the communities about what your priorities are. As we are looking at new projects for the next round or the next STIP, what projects would you like to see at least test scored, so we know maybe how they would shake out as far as scoring, things that have support from your community, as we kind of look into what projects we'll be submitting. We can submit 26 projects for each mode, so 26 highway projects, 26 bike ped, 26 public transportation, 26 aviation projects. So what we do is we get we cover 34 communities, and that's including the 3 counties. And so we get everyone's priorities, and then we just start test scoring. And most of the time, our board will make the decision to submit the top 26 scoring projects, the ones that have the potential to score the best and have the highest possibility of getting funded. So projects that we are going to be kind of testing to see how they score for Belmont include South Point Road widening. In the past, that project has been submitted as a project to widen that roadway to a 3-lane facility. And it's been one full project from, I guess, Stowe Road or even all the way down to Lower Armstrong Road. It has not scored very well that way. So one thing that we're going to be looking at is how would the project score as a 4-lane divided facility? I don't think 3 lanes is going to do anything. It's not going to move traffic any better. So what would that project look like as a 4-lane divided? And also, how would it score if we submitted it in segments? So the first segment being from R.L. Stowe to Bellwood, or where the new school driveway is going to be. That would be one segment. A second segment would be from Bellwood down to Henry Chapel. And then a third segment would be Henry Chapel to Lower Armstrong. So we're going to put them in that way, kind of see how they score, play around with it, see if, maybe segment 1 needs to go first and then segment 3. And we're just going to play around and see how we can come up with a project that scores the best. So we've heard loud and clear that is a priority of Belmont. Also, the Woodlawn Street corridor. So looking at that as a potential 3-lane with bike ped accommodations. And I can tell you, too, most of the widening projects that we submit, we're automatically including bike ped. So whether it is on-street bike lanes and sidewalks or parallel shared use path alongside a road. So we know how important that is to our community, so we're just going ahead and submitting them with the bike ped accommodations. But looking at the Woodlawn Street corridor from Belmont Mount Holly Road to School Street or Acme, also thinking of the realignment of Acme at the Oaks, that entrance to that. Maybe that's just a standalone intersection project with the realignment. So those are things that we've heard and we're going to be looking into. Also, the intersection improvement at Park Street and Catawba Street. I can tell you that the MPO had the chance to submit 10 intersection improvement projects, pre-submit those to NCDOT so that the congestion management unit could be kind of looking through how these projects would score, and to also kind of think through the different intersection improvement treatments that could be made, whether it's right turn lanes, left turn lanes, whether it's constructing a roundabout. So one of the projects, we submitted quite a few, and I'll go down, but one of the projects that we did submit for the pre-submittal was the Park Street and Catawba Street intersection improvement. So the way we entered it into the system, and this is how it's going to be just reviewed, but then it could also be changed and the congestion management unit could come up with something else. But at a glance, we submitted it to add dedicated left turn lanes in all directions, all approaches, as well as a right turn lane from Keener to Catawba Street. And that's if folks were kind of heading down that way. We know that they use NC7 sometimes to get out to 74 on that side of town. So we did submit that one. We also submitted the intersection improvement project at South Central Avenue at Keener. So we submitted that to add a left turn lane from southbound South Central onto Keener, and then as well as add a right turn lane from northbound South Central to Keener. And we'll hear how that is being scored. Also, we didn't do a pre-submittal on this because we only had 10 slots, and we, again, work with many communities. But one thing we have heard to take a look at for the next round of prioritization is intersection improvement project at South Main Street and South Central with pedestrian improvements. And I believe, did we submit that one last year? Or was that, I know that's one that we were looking at as a standalone bike ped project, but maybe there's other improvements that could be made at that intersection as well that we'll be looking at.
We submitted that as a bike ped project,
Yeah.
and it didn't score well.
Yeah, it
And I
was
think
just bike ped.
You talked to DOT about a study of that signal for dedicated left turn lanes, or left turn arrows.
Yeah.
And it said that it didn't qualify because of
Yeah.
the traffic counts.
Traffic counts weren't there.
But
Okay.
we still want to keep
So
that
we'll,
on the list.
yeah, so we'll be looking at what the improvements could potentially be on that one. Also looking at the proposed Belmont Mount Holly Loop. I know that's gaining importance, especially as the middle school's coming in and there's going to be a potential connection to that. So looking at how that may score in various segments as well. So we'll be taking a look at that. And that's a proposed boulevard, so a 4-lane divided configuration. One thing too that we may need to resubmit, we don't know, is that U 5800, that's the intersection improvement project at Main Street and Wilkinson Boulevard. So depending upon the design, so if the Michigan lefts is a no-go, but maybe we're gonna have to add so many left turn lanes and right turn lanes to have that intersection function properly. If it becomes way more costly than how it was, the cost estimate that was provided when it was first funded, it may be that we have to resubmit that project as a new project. So you might have to just forfeit the funding that was allocated and kind of start from scratch. So we don't know that yet, but that might be a possibility, that something that we have to do.
If we were to do that, the funding that's in place, does it go to another local project here or just thrown back into a general pool?
Most of the time, it just throws back into the general statewide. One thing too that we are looking at, and we've submitted as one of the 10, is the potential to take the intersection at Park Street and Wilkinson Boulevard, taking that from an at-grade intersection like it is now, to a potential interchange, a grade-separated interchange. So Park would be above 74. Knowing the traffic in that area, knowing that we want to make NC 273 or Park flowing as much as possible to get onto 85, also thinking through future light rail coming down 74. We just threw it into the mix of how would that potentially score if it were a grade separated interchange. So it would be a tighter kind of diamond interchange is what we had submitted it as. So it will be interesting to see how that may come back. But we think that will help tremendously with traffic flowing north-south on 273 and east-west on 74.
And DOT is looking at that at the intersection of Franklin and Cox Road, there at the old gas mall,
Yep.
because of the grade differences there.
It is.
Sometimes it's easier to.
Yep. So it will be interesting to see how that could potentially score. And thinking through the pedestrian movements as well, if you could get pedestrians on a grade-separated bridge, you would have to have pedestrians to east-west, but it would take out that one directional conflict. So we'll see how that one scores. Also, one thing that we submitted as one of the 10 pre-submittals that's not in Belmont, but it's right outside, is the intersection with Eagle Road and Lakewood Road in Cramerton, submitting that as a roundabout. So it had been submitted years ago for a project, but a lot has changed with the school being in place now, so we've kind of resubmitted that to see how that could potentially score. Obviously, one of the priorities of not only Belmont, but I would say most of the communities, if not all the communities within Gaston County. Certainly a priority for the MPO is the Catawba Crossings project. So the new bridge crossings of the South Fork and the Catawba to connect from South New Hope Road over to I-485. That's not going to be a project that will be submitted in this next round because we were directed to work together with the MPO on the other side of the river to conduct a feasibility study or complete a feasibility study. So we are in the process of developing a scope of work for that with a cost estimate that we will be applying to NCDOT for some funding. Have been told that it's a priority for DOT as well. So I think that we've got a really good probability of getting that feasibility study funded. And that will set us up to be able to apply for funding in the next round of prioritization. So, 2 years from now, we'll have that project ready to submit. So I just, still a priority, but just not ready to submit for this next round of funding. We also talked to you all about your priorities for bike and ped. South Point Road at Stowe Road, think about a mid-block crossing, a signalized mid-block crossing for the pedestrians. I guess that would be in the vicinity of the new school. So we will be kind of seeing how that could score as a bike ped project. Also completing sidewalk gaps along Nixon Road between Amberley and the school. Greenway into Cramerton near Eagle. We know there's a gap there, and unfortunately there's a railroad that crosses there that we would have to figure out, but that's a priority project. That's part of the Carolina Thread Trail, so that's one that we'll look at. Also, Ewing Drive, so from the park to South Point Road, I think was the notes. Is that correct? That one I kind of had a question mark, but sidewalk on the east side of Ewing, filling in some gaps. Got a puzzled look, so take a look at that and see if we've got that right.
Probably connecting the school to Gilcrest Circle, which
Okay.
is at Stowe Point.
Okay.
Because there's sidewalk on Ewing between Park Street or I guess Keener Boulevard and Page Primary School.
So you said that's okay, so that's Page School to
Yeah,
what?
So from Page Primary to Gilcrest Circle
Gilchrist. Okay.
Street Drive, Gilcrest.
Okay, I'll look that up. But it's along Ewing.
Yes.
Okay. And also back to the Woodlawn Street corridor that we talked about, potential widening or intersection realignment, but thinking through if it's not a widening project or a highway project, thinking through how it could score just as a bike ped project to add sidewalks and bike lanes from Belmont Mount Holly Road to the school, to School Street. So that is what we heard are the priorities for Belmont, and we will certainly be looking at how those could score. And they will be on the list that our board will review when they select the 26 projects. So timeline of P6 is, we're currently talking to all the communities. Most likely we will do a full-on call for projects at our March meeting, maybe May. It's something we do. It's a little scary because that's when the citizens can submit any and all projects to us, and we get some interesting submittals for projects. But and then we will be kind of in the background running, seeing how all these could potentially score, and then we will bring a draft list of projects to the board at your July meeting. And then we will release the draft list, and that's the draft, like, top 26 projects for each mode. We'll release that for a 30-day public comment period that will happen in August. And then we'll bring the final list to the board at the September meeting. And then we have until the end of September 27th is the day after our board meeting to actually have those in the Spot Online system as submitted projects. And then, so that's through September of 2019. October to February of 2020 is when NCDOT will be looking at all the projects statewide. They'll be running them through, calculating the quantitative scores. And then in March of 2020, we will know what projects are going to be funded at the statewide tier. And then April 2020 through July of 2020, the MPOs will be doing our local input points. And then that will kind of go through, we'll know what projects are going to be funded at the division or the regional tier in August of 2020, and then we'll go through the process for division tier. And then we will have the draft STIP released in January of 2021. So these are 2-year cycles, but it's nonstop. So as soon as, I mean, we were already working on P6 before the draft STIP even came out of the last round. So it's just a nonstop process, but that's the timeline for the next round of prioritization. Any questions? This is a lot of information, I know.
I have 2 questions. One about the Build-A-Better Boulevard. Is DOT looking at that project that we have there because it doesn't sound like it's meshing very well in some places.
So I think a lot of the projects that were submitted for funding are certainly directly out of the Build-A-Better
Okay.
Boulevard plan.
All right.
Now, when the design comes, that's where it's not meshing.
All right. The other thing, and I brought this up several times, but I don't know what we need to do, but South Point Road, we've discussed, several times. Now that they have the stoplight at Harris Teeter, it's tripping every time there's one car coming out of Harris Teeter. So the South Point Road is a much worse situation now than it was before that. And so I don't know what DOT can do, but we've talked about it, and I know Adrian's discussed it with them too. But it's really not quite a disaster, but if you look at it from a traffic standpoint, I would probably call it that. Because I'm there at different times of the day, at 7 in the morning, and afternoon, and evening too, and you've stopped the main flow of traffic for one vehicle. And so it doesn't, as far as I can tell, and I don't know how, how it's set up, but it looks like no matter whether the person's turning right or not out of there, it's still stopping it. And so, I would assume you're thinking some of those are right turns, and so there's no way for the accountability. I'm not a traffic engineer, but there surely has to be something that is a better mousetrap than what we're seeing so far.
Okay. I can bring that to Byron Engel as the Division 12 traffic engineer.
Okay.
So I can bring that to his attention to see if there's anything that he can do.
Yeah, and
with it.
obviously, first thing in the morning when people are going to school and to work and stuff, it's the worst. And I've been out there at 6:30, at 7, and all, and it's already a big mess. And it's, said Harris Teeter's supposed to help us, but that part's worse.
Yeah.
That's at
Okay.
the intersection of Red Raider Run, South Point Road.
Okay.
But while they're looking at the other piece of that particular intersection, they did not signalize it from South Point High School because it's an entrance for the parents, but it's for the ball games and events, you're having people come out. It's used both directions, and there's no signal there.
Okay.
So if they're going to do anything with it, it'd be wonderful if they could take care of both things at one time. I'm not hopeful, but I would like to at least have them look at it.
That's a good idea. I had exited that way. I dropped
Right.
him
Yeah.
off from school late, and I went there, and I said, I wasn't sure if I was at an entrance or an exit, because there was no traffic light there.
Well, and in the afternoon after, the reason it's like that to start with is because of me. Because back when Mike Holder was here and different people were complaining because we had traffic queuing up all the way to to the Methodist Church in the afternoons with people picking up their kids. And so Mike Holder came and we met and did it so that everybody's supposed to go around the back. But that's when it was set up as a one-way, and the intention was not that it be that way all the time, but that's evidently, so that's the history of that part of it.
Okay. Yeah, we'll bring that.
Randy, let me ask you a question, because you said you're automatically adding bike ped to all the submittals around here. That comes from a separate pool of money than the roads, right? The bike ped projects, don't they have their own pool?
So if it's anything within the curb line, so curb to curb, it is paid for as part of the roadway widening. So if like you add a bike lane, they just wrap it in, so I think it's the same pot of money. Betterments, as far as sidewalk, I do believe comes out of a separate pot. And those have a local match commitment to them. So communities with smaller populations have a lower percentage that they have to pay local match. Do you know by chance what yours is?
I don't, and I was gonna ask
Okay.
you about that.
Yeah,
Well,
it's a sliding scale, but that doesn't mean if we submit it for funding, it does help with the scoring because they look at it as a multimodal project and it gets a few extra points. But that doesn't commit you to having to pay in a local match. So project's funded, and then once it's being designed, and we add that bike ped component to it, at that point, we would receive information of what the local commitment, and you could say, yes, we want to participate, or no, we don't want to participate. So it doesn't lock you in, just because we're submitting it that way, doesn't lock you into
All right, but
funding that.
you say it comes out of the roadway money. All right, well, let me ask you, I mean, just from a strategy standpoint, is that a good strategy? Because if the costs come back high, what we really need is the road. I mean, I would like to have the bike ped, but the road is the priority. So, I mean, when you're adding concrete sidewalks for the length of the road, I mean, that's adding a lot of cost. And while it's nice, we still got priorities to move the traffic.
Yeah, and we can look at it as we're scoring it, we can look at it in both ways. I haven't seen it move the needle substantially on cost estimates because it's much easier to build it as part of a road widening project than to come back in later.
Okay.
But, you know, we can kind of look
Yeah,
at
well, I mean,
it
if it
in
doesn't
both
move the
ways.
needle much, it's not a factor then.
And that one in particular would be nice to have, particularly on the north side of Woodlawn. You know, our long-term plan for the rail trail is to connect downtown to Belmont Abbey, but then have a crosswalk across Belmont Mount Holly Road and then have sidewalk there on Woodlawn, and that's our connection to the North Belmont communities. So, if, you know, long-term to get all of it, so if we could get it with the road widening.
Yeah.
And I was gonna ask, so, I don't know if you were at the meeting that we had on the Catawba River Bridge replacement back a month or two ago. Shelley and I was down at the college,
Yep.
and they were talking, so the DOT folks were talking about what we wanted, what our vision for the new Catawba River Bridge, and did we want bike ped on it? And they said that would be a betterment, it would be a local share.
Yes, and we've got a meeting scheduled on Friday. They had asked me to coordinate the really the communities are Belmont and the county, Gaston County, but we're also talking to the folks on the other side of the river too, but what that local commitment would look like, what's considered betterment, what could be incorporated in the cost of constructing the bridge. So we'll be hearing straight from NCDOT Bike Ped as well as the structures unit as we're kind of coordinating what that looks like.
And if I understood them correctly, they sort of hinted that they may be revisiting that policy.
Yes, so NCDOT Bike Ped is currently working on a new complete streets policy. Because one thing that we would love to see across the bridge is not just a sidewalk and bike lanes, but a shared use path parallel. So right now, there's a policy for sidewalks with that sliding scale of local match, but it doesn't address anything if it's a shared use path. So that's one thing that DOT is currently looking at, because a lot of communities are going toward that. Let's don't do on-street bike lanes and sidewalks. Let's just get everything out of the right-of-way or out of the roadway and having that parallel shared use path. So that is certainly one thing that they're currently looking at that policy. And they may share some new information at our meeting Friday, I don't know.
If we do that, would Charlotte or Mecklenburg County be interested in splitting that cost if there is a cost?
So that's what we'll need to find out. So we're meeting with them on some betterments.
Yeah.
So we had a big meeting I can't, I find out when, it's probably November, early December, with folks from a bunch of branches of DOT, plus Gaston County, Belmont, Charlotte, Mecklenburg County, and a whole lot of consultants
Yeah.
and MPO. And so we sort of broke the project into several different functional areas. And then CATS was there. So, but two of the things that would be more of interest to, particularly to the city, is the bike pad component, because we've got the river park on our side, and Mecklenburg County, it's got that greenway and nature preserve on their side of the river, so it would be nice to connect those with bike pad facilities. And then you've got, of course, the Whitewater Center north, and so for cyclists, it's once you get across the bridge, it's pretty easy to get at the Whitewater Center. But also on just the physical appearance of the bridge, you know, how pretty, for lack of a better word, we want that bridge to be. So we're, and that might be part of the meeting Friday.
It is, it's all together, yep.
Of, you know, what we want it to look like, to make this a nice signature bridge, because we only replace it every 80 years. So we want it to look, you know, nice as well as functional. But those are all added costs that would be shared by the local governments. And our jurisdiction basically ends at the water, and then the county has jurisdiction to midway across the river, and then it's Mecklenburg County
In Charlotte, yep.
in Charlotte. Actually, I think it's
No,
Mecklenburg County.
yeah, just maybe it's Mecklenburg County. So yeah, you would only be responsible, talking bike ped, the aesthetics, the railings and everything on the bridge, I think is gonna have to be a separate discussion, because I don't know how that would be divvied up. But as far as I know, the bike ped, you would only be responsible for the betterment that's in your jurisdiction. So like Adrian said, what's in Belmont, what's in Gaston County, what's in Mecklenburg County, so everything would be just divided per how much, I guess, linear footage you have like in your jurisdiction.
And so then we have to certainly coordinate with the county
Right.
to see if the county is willing to spend money on this bridge as well.
Well, the
Okay.
other piece of that puzzle too, the Vineyards, of course, is sizable as it is, but they're building several hundred more houses across the road. So I've had people who know I'm over here say to me they really wish that it was safe for them to come across, because they would love to ride bikes and all that kind of stuff into Belmont to the park and the different facilities and stuff that we have. So we've got a huge population coming in this direction if we ever get that set up properly.
Yeah, and we need to do it now, because they're not gonna add it later.
Yeah.
But I can say, to your point, Gaston County has stepped up more so in the last year or so to provide local match amounts for bike ped amenities. I know 2 projects along South New Hope Road and even north of New Hope Road in Dallas, they've committed to local match for some of that. They're building sidewalk on another portion of road that's split between Gastonia and the county. So they are stepping up and putting in money to make these projects happen. So I would be shocked if they did not want to participate in this. So
It's the gateway into their county.
it is. And again, if it doesn't happen now, it's not going to happen.
Then one other sort of betterment discussion that I've had with a couple city managers is, as we widen 85 and replace the overpasses, there's an opportunity to have some sort of consistent theme of the new bridges that are built. And we don't know what that would be or what kind of branding we want to do, but there may be an opportunity to do something to make those bridges look nice. And of course, we've got the first ones in Belmont, so we'll have some of those preliminary discussions.
Yeah, and I'm in the process of rescheduling that meeting. We were supposed to have that discussion tomorrow, and then now I'm tied up in another meeting with the federal agencies about the I-85 widening project, so we need to get that rescheduled. But we are going to be looking at tomorrow potential interchange design options for the I-85 widening project, and I just sent you and Shelley, I shared with you those potential design options, and I had missed that link to those when they sent it out last week, but it'd be good if you had a chance to review those potential designs and get me any comments so that I can be your voice in that meeting tomorrow.
You need that tomorrow?
The meeting's at 1, sorry.
So Shelley will have that to you by noon tomorrow.
That was completely my fault for not seeing that. I thought they were gonna send it to me as an attachment, I never saw it come through, and then when I looked at the calendar invite, it was a link at the very bottom. So, my fault on that one, sorry. But yeah, if you can provide me any comments, you know, because I don't know all of your wants for those interchanges, and I want to make sure that I don't miss something. So everything will have to go through me so I can be the one providing all the comments. But certainly anything that you have, get that to me, and I'll make sure it's heard as part of the meeting tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. Martha, you asked about Build a Better Boulevard earlier. So, you know, in response to this Michigan Left project, I went back and looked at our recommendations. So the top recommendation of the Build a Better Boulevard was signalization upgrades and ICM, the Integrated Corridor Management. And we've just had meetings on that today, and so that's in the works. And that was, if you remember, that was the number one priority, because it was estimated that would have the most benefit and the lowest cost. And so that's underway, and that the new signal detection loops are in place now. They're waiting on the software to come in, so they hope to go live with the new signal system, coordinated responsive signal system, this spring. So that was the number one priority. And then the integrated corridor management, where you look at the technology of the signal systems, plus better signage on the interstate to divert traffic to 74, and then coordinating with first responders. And I mean, it gets down into the level of detail of when IMAP comes out and pushes cars out of the lane onto the shoulder, and trying to reduce the time all that takes. So it's integrated with 911, with the highway patrol, with IMAP, with the traffic control centers. So that's already underway, and that's being funded and should roll out this year, by next year, I think is the goal.
Yep.
And then the intersection improvements, which are funded. And of course, we submitted the intersection improvements as, I think, another northbound through lane on Main Street and other signal improvements, or intersection improvements. And then DOT takes that, and then they hire a consultant to study it, and the consultant tells us what is best for us. So that's where the kind of the breakdown is. And of course, the consultants nor DOT ever reached out to us. They've got all our information. They've got our bike plan, they've got our ped plan, they've got our Build a Better Boulevard plan, they've got the Thread Trail master plan, but they just didn't reach out to us.
In the Build a Better Boulevard, if I remember, Metricology had put in a kind of a grand design to rework that intersection going to the interstate. And part of that, if I remember Dimitri's presentation, was the flow of traffic, because there was going to be increased volume. And I still think that's got to be the main theme. I mean, from my perspective, you know, is that the traffic volumes north-south are going to increase. And that's that's a small road. And the Michigan, I'm not a fan of the Michigan Left. I think you got to look at another design. I hate to sacrifice that money. But, you know, the other problem that I have with it, if they're going to do it on the other side of the road, when 85 backs up, nobody can make that left to head east. So I don't know how that's going to work with the traffic turning right, heading toward Aldi's. I mean, is everybody going to make a U-turn, tractor trailers and everybody?
Yeah, and there would be a signal. That would have a signal right there, yeah. And the reason I think, I guess, again, I'm not a traffic engineer, but from what I've heard them say is to have that intersection functioning at a level of service C or better, that they would have to add so many turn lanes that it would take out potentially, I guess it's the Bojangles and the McDonald's right there. So then you're looking at having to buy that, and the cost to purchase that is, the right-of-way is going to drastically increase the right-of-way cost estimate. So that's, I mean.
But I mean, that being a factor, and you know, it's not a good option, but I mean, isn't the goal to move it in the direction of at least a C?
Yeah, and I think what they were doing was trying to have the least amount of impact to the businesses that are there. So with the Michigan left, they could do that without having to take out those businesses.
Would that also affect the trolley line?
Yes.
So that would be a major issue right there.
So that's all things that Belmont's gonna have to weigh those options of,
Well, how would it affect the trolley line? Because we're not gonna be able to touch DOT, the rail right of way. I mean, anything.
The
over-
signalization crossing Wilkinson
With the Michigan left or with, okay.
would be additional, potentially additional crossing gates, additional expense. And I sort of, my feelings got hurt with this whole process because DOT didn't reach out and contact us and didn't communicate and coordinate with us. But I feel better today, sort of, in our meeting on the integrated corridor management system, that DOT doesn't communicate with DOT either. So the signals folks from Raleigh that came down to lay out their plans, we asked them how the Michigan left at the two intersections would work with their signal plans. It's the first time they had heard of that. And so,
I wondered how you're gonna say you felt better after that. That's really
Adrian got a good kick out of that.
I told Randy, I said, look, they don't even coordinate with themselves.
Oh,
So,
my.
And it's a big organization with a bunch of divisions, and they're spread out over the state, but you would think they could at least, if they're all working on the same corridor, would communicate with each other. But I will give Randy credit. She reached out to us in November and December about our priorities for 6.0, and I don't recall anybody from the MPO doing that in the previous versions of prioritization, so I do appreciate your taking the time to do that. Not just for us, but for the other local governments.
Thank you, and you're welcome.
And actually asking what we wanted, what our priorities were ahead of time. So I appreciate that. So that's all we really had for today's meeting. We're right at an hour. So if you have any other questions for Randy, or just thinking about when you want to meet, is there a time? Is 4 o'clock okay for your schedule?
Seems to work.
Okay. And then why don't we look at the MPO board meeting and the TCC meetings and sort of figure out maybe a time between those two? Because I want you to be able to join us as you can. And I know probably that week of the MPO board meeting is a hearing.
I mean, it's okay. I like the 4 o'clock meeting. A lot of the other communities are in the evenings, and I had told Adrian earlier, I participate in Gastonia's Council Transportation Committee. Kings Mountain is starting one up, so any information I can provide at those meetings, if I'm able to make it, even if it's a quick update. But as Adrian mentioned, like Gastonia, they sometimes get in the weeds of converting a 4-way stop into a 2-way, and I mean that's outside of MPO stuff. That's City of Gastonia, and you'll be, I'm sure, talking through some of those issues too. That, but anything bigger, federal funding related that I can help with, I don't mind attending these meetings, even if it's just to kind of listen in. If you don't have anything for me to add. And I was thinking too, as I said, federal, Shelley, the comment about if we could somehow combine the, is that East Catawba Street, NC7? I bet when I reach out, they're gonna say no, because that bridge replacement project is completely state funded. The intersection improvement project is federal funding. And when you put a penny of federal, we just can't mix those projects because it federalizes the entire bridge replacement project, and they don't want to do that. They can't do that. So I bet that's the response I'm going to get. I'll still ask the question, but I bet that's the response.
Well,
I'm
if we
gonna
could just get the timing at the same time, I don't care if
Yeah.
it's one, but the timing just doesn't make sense to interrupt that intersection twice.
get. Yeah. I agree. I'll just.
Makes sense. Yeah, that's the opportunity phrase there.
So, I will ask, but that's all I can do.
The city has funding, we have have money from that one
Set aside,
project to
right.
help.
And I think we did include that.
Include that?
We did.
We did.
Okay.
Right before that was, the final scores came out, I remember, because we got that letter. Yeah, so I'll ask the question.
All right, thank you.
Let me just throw one more quick thought, something just came to me. I think Dean had mentioned this because we were talking about the traffic circle. And he said, I think they were looking at or considering coming off South Point Road, kind of a sweeping right to where the traffic could just bleed off directly and not have to approach that intersection. Because you have very limited traffic going down to Reflection Point. The bulk of the traffic is making the right turn there. I mean, is that still, I know he's kind of toying with that, but
I haven't seen, I mean, I know that they're reaching out. Shelley had provided some information of the future development or approved development in the area. So I think they're looking at all potential options for a design there, as they're working on their traffic, essentially a traffic study is what I think the point that they are in the process right now. I mean, because you can see they immediately get started on these. It's not even a finalized STIP, and they're already starting to kind of look through.
They were asking what options we had looked at, and so the gentleman from NCDOT contacted me last week sometime and talked to me a little bit about that project, what alternatives that he looked at that intersection, what development's going on along Lower Armstrong, and in that area. So I sent them all that information, and I shared with them how people are going
cutting
through the neighborhood to bypass that stop sign there. And what's interesting, Morgan's Branch just put in a request, they want to put speed limit signs up within their neighborhood now, because cars in the morning are just working through, so they can get the right of way going up South.
Those roads certainly were not built to handle.
No, they
Cut through
can't
traffic.
handle any additional traffic.
I think we got to do something or look at something. 8 years is just too long a window for any kind of relief there.
Any other questions or comments? All right. Can I get a motion to adjourn this meeting?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, all in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
All right, thank you. 5:11. Thank you, Randy.
And 4 o'clock is fine with me. I actually, when I took the job with Gaston Day, I asked that at the beginning, because I said there are occasions I'll need to be back over here by 4, so they're aware of that.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you, going into the retreat
Yes, sir.
on trash collection,
Yes.
we're going to discuss it, the pros and cons, and if we bring it back to the city versus continue to the private service.
There's like
Do David, or do you have access to the numbers?
Okay, just go ahead and say.
Look at the numbers, because I know in the original